Okay, everyone, thank you. Good morning. Good morning, and thank you for attending our League of Women Voters Primary Candidate Forum. I am Karen Lewis, the Secretary of the League of Women Voters here in Lynn County. Since its founding in 1920, the League of Women Voters has been an organization which encourages informed and active participation in government. Through its mission, the League works to increase the understanding of major public policy issues and influences public policy through education and advocacy. Today's forum is part of our voter education efforts. We are really pleased this morning to have the candidates running for the Democratic nomination for State Senate District 37 with us today, Molly Donohoe and Austin Frerichs. Thank you both for taking the time to be here today and to share your views. A moment, if you'll allow me, to discuss the format for today's forum. Questions were submitted by audience members present here today, so if you do have a yellow sheet of paper, I encourage you to write the questions you have for the candidates. Hold those up, and we will be around to collect them, and they will be asked throughout the 45 minutes that we have allocated here this morning. For each question, the candidate will have 2 minutes to respond. Candidates will also have 2 minutes for opening and closing statements. A timer will hold up the card for 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and then again at the end of our time together, they'll have the stop sign. All right. So with that, we'll begin with opening statements, and I will have Austin Frerichs start this morning.
All right. First, I want to thank again for everyone who put this event together. So a little bit about me. I'm a graduate of Jefferson High School. I went to Grinnell College. First, my family to go to college. I went on a combination of Pell Grants, and I like to joke Bohemian money. I was Czech Village Prince back in the day, so I know Hobie Days really well. What I do for a living now is I work remote. I am Deputy Director of an Antitrust Center at Yale. So corporate consolidation is what I do. And I promise this wasn't intentional, but I accidentally wore my Monopoly socks today. We're seeing it right now with baby formula. This is a market that's incredibly concentrated. It's been concentrated for decades, and nothing's been done. I think we're in a concentration crisis in the American economy, and I actually think it's an incredibly bipartisan issue. I should also say that Iowa's been very good to me, but the Iowa I see today is not the Iowa I grew up in. And I believe that Democrats cannot keep running the same playbook and expecting different results. I think it's time for Democrats to go on the offense. I personally knocked over 4,400 doors, and education is what I'm hearing the most, but also water quality. But in general, Democrats are just excited to see a fresh young face talk about offense. So many Democrats, I jokingly tell people I do emotional therapy for Democrats right now, because they feel like we're on the defense in Iowa. And what I have to remind them is Kim Reynolds barely won her last race. It was 3-point difference. Democrats control half the statewide offices in Iowa. We need to stand up and fight back. And that is what my candidacy is about, and I hope to earn your vote. Thank you.
Thanks, Molly.
Good morning, and thank you to the League of Women Voters for putting this forum on, and for all of you for joining us today. I am Molly Donohoe. I have been a state representative in the area that I live today and grew up in for the last 4 years. I have had the honor of working for and with so many different people in our community. I am a school teacher of 31 years. I have gone to worked in the buildings that I grew up in, that I went to school in, and now I teach in as well in the Cedar Rapids District. I work with at-risk youth, the behaviorally disordered boys, and I've done that the entire time. I am there for many different reasons, because I ran on education in the first place, because we aren't getting what we need in our schools. But there are so many other things happening in our district today. What I'm hearing on the doors, and I have hit just a little over what Austin has hit, we are hearing mostly about education, but what I am hearing about most on the doors next to that is jobs. Being able to live, pay for the bills, pay for food, affordable housing, making sure they have insurance. There are a lot of concerns that are happening in our district right now because we've been in a crisis for the last few years with COVID, and then we also had the derecho hit us. So this particular area in Marion and Northeast Cedar Rapids and Southeast Cedar Rapids has had a lot of different things happening, and I've been there to support the people in my community one-on-one, and I want to make sure that I can continue to do that and be available to them for any future needs that they have. Thank you.
Oop, careful. All right. So what we're going to do for questions is we will ask a question first, second, and then the person who answers second, if you don't mind staying, because you'll go first the next time, and we'll just kind of, if you saw that last forum, we'll bounce back and forth. Thank you. All right, so our first question is, what do you think the top priorities of the Senate should be? Oh, I'm sorry, why don't we start with Austin?
To me, the two top priorities are education and water quality. Iowa's in a water crisis right now. Most lakes in this state are closed in the summer. McBride, Backbone. The rivers are basically an open sewer at this point, and I think it's corporate greed. Most people don't realize most farmland in Iowa is owned by non-Iowans at this point. It's investment property for Bill Gates and the like. Most animals in Iowa are owned by non-Iowans now. The largest owner of hogs in America is a Chinese corporation. We are paying for their pollution and their greed. I think this is a space that Democrats need to go on offense more, and this is something I want to carve out my legislative career on, is the water crisis, and to show that this water crisis in Iowa is because of Kim Reynolds and corporate greed. The largest political donor in Iowa right now is a hog baron. One man who owns 5 million hogs writes her a $400,000 check. That is why the Department of Natural Resources has been systematically underfunded and defanged. It is why there's no oversight and why we have this crisis. But then education too. I mean, we put education on our state quarter. It's the hallmark of Iowa. It's what makes Iowa, Iowa. And that is something we do not respect it, and we do not fund it the way it should be. And that is because of the results of the continuation of the Terry Branstad to the Reynolds administration. And let's be very clear, Kim just wants to be Trump's vice president right now. Everything she is doing is to appease robber barons on the coast, those donors. It's not about what's best for Iowa. The thing that I've heard the most that angers people in this district is how she showed up and had that secret meeting. This is a community went through a 5-hour board meeting arguing over the transgender policy that was really divisive, incredibly divisive, and just a nastiness that we don't normally see in Iowa. And to come in here and do a secret meeting and stir the pot and use children as political weapons for your presidential campaign is unacceptable, and I would say vile. And I don't like using that word. There's something about her. I've never seen a hatred of a governor in my history as the way Iowans dislike Kim Reynolds. Thank you so much.
You have 2 minutes. Yes, thank you.
So the Senate today has nobody that is an educator on it. And that's part of the reason why I believe we are finding the bills coming out of there so divisive towards education. It's just a extension of Kim Reynolds' arm to fight back at the public schools and to get the tax dollars into private people's pockets for profit. So that's one of the things we need to do, is make sure that we have strong educators in that Senate to make sure that we have better things coming out for our schools. The other thing we need to look at is making sure that we have good jobs here. If we don't have good jobs here, what I'm hearing on my doors is that we can't afford to be here if we don't have jobs that pay the bills. Water is an issue here. I'm a kayaker. I haven't put my kayak in the water for 3 years because of the bacteria. I have been part of the CAFO bills that get pushed back by the Republicans on a regular basis at the State House. We do have a matrix of CAFOs that is out of control. We have, any given time, 300 million pigs here, and we only have 3 million Iowans. That is a huge problem for our waterways. On top of that, we need to make sure that we have mental health facilities available, because Iowans have had a huge uptick with what's happened between COVID and derecho of mental health and issues in this state that are not being covered. So we need to make sure we take care of that as well. So between jobs, health care, which is a human right, it should not be inaccessible to anyone for any reason. Our education system definitely needs to be protected and fought for. And those are the things that I have been working on in the State House and I would like to continue to work on as a senator. Thank you.
Oop, Ms. Donohoe, do you mind staying? Thank you.
I'm staying this time.
All right. The question is, how have you helped individuals in this district?
So for the last 4 years, I've had the great opportunity of working in the Marion, Ely, and parts of Cedar Rapids. I can tell you that because of the COVID situation, and because of the derecho, that we have had a lot of individuals in the district with personal needs. I have had contacts from people who have unemployment issues, and I've helped them receive their unemployment. So James received all his back pay. I can tell you that Anna and her husband didn't have any gas money during COVID to go to the grocery store, and they had to worry about their health. So every time they went to a store, they had to worry about coming back and infecting somebody in their home that is vulnerable. And so when they contacted me and I couldn't find available services to them, I went out and got them groceries myself. These are things I'm available to the people in my district. They can call me, they can come to my house, and they have. I have helped people with unemployment. I've helped people with getting materials that they needed during the derecho to rebuild their mobile homes. I have helped people with their unemployment, with food, and I will continue to do all of those things in the Senate, and I want to be able to help the people. I believe being part of the community and invested in your people in the community is what makes this job important. The people should come first. I will continue to do that and much more in the Senate. Thank you.
I actually did this last night where I was knocking doors, spoke with someone being evicted. And so I sat down with her and we talked about Iowa Legal Aid. She didn't know that service existed. It's, you provide legal services to help with that. One of my best friends works at the the Des Moines clinic, but we connected with her, someone at the Cedar Rapids clinic. I mean, that to me is why I door knock, is you hear the problems people face. And as people in my family can attest to, I'm very type A, and I'm all about checklists and getting things done. So how can I help you? Sorry, my mom's nodding her head.
Okay.
I actually love doing doors. It's weird. I mean, a lot of, I'm kind of known now in this part of, people see I wear bright yellow shoes. Part of it is because I knock until about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And you go home, I take a little list, I write things down, you follow up with people, you connect them. I mean, this is just a state Senate job. A lot of people's concerns are federal level. So even though I might disagree with Ashley Hinson, I've connected people with Ashley Hinson's office for different federal benefits that they're entitled to, that they pay for. Because a lot of it is, I mean, we live in an era where the newspapers aren't what they used to be, and people don't know where to go. So they feel lost, lonely, especially with COVID. I think loneliness is the big thing right now because of COVID and what's happened in the last few years. So a lot of it is going to people and being receptive and respectful to what they need.
Well said. All right. The next question is, what do you plan on doing about our water?
Oh. I mean, this is what my career is. I've been working on the last few years. I mean, I even helped put together the first presidential forum in 2020 on this, the Heartland Forum. It was up in Storm Lake, Iowa with Art Colin. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. I want to put animals back on the land. I think one of the worst things to happen in modern Iowa history is CAFOs, these industrial animal facilities. We basically we destroyed the family farm, and now we have corporate farms with absentee landowners. These people do not care for the land, they do not care for the workers, they do not care for the animals. Also, the meat doesn't taste as good, let's be frank. I'm laughing too, because also at our wedding I made sure we had Iowa pasture meat. But with water quality is, these things, I mean, like, you have beef cattle will put out 60 pounds of waste a day per animal. The environment cannot handle this. You drive in rural Iowa now, you rarely see animals in the land. You do not see a hog. You might see a dairy farm, but that dairy farm will probably end in a few years. and now they figure out how to put beef indoors. That to me is what's driving this water crisis, and that to me is also what the hope of what Iowa could be. Iowa could be, and it should be, Italy. We have the best farmland in the world. There's a lot of these towns have great backbones. I mean, think of the tourism that could be. You fly in, you do a cheese tour, you do all that. I mean, there's a lot of people doing the right thing out there, practical farmers of Iowa. How do we grow on that? And you can't just talk it. I mean, a lot of this is, I go back to one of my heroes is Teddy Roosevelt. Everyone thinks he was this great trust buster. In reality, Taft did more. He understood you got to galvanize people. And I think that's the skill set I bring is I understand how to draw attention. How do I do oversight? How do I get people to care? How do I get people to realize this water crisis because of corporate greed, but also what it could be? Because you can't just complain right now. The world's dark and people don't want to hear it. They want to see hope. They want to see what the system could be. And I think that's incredibly inspiring because all beef served in our schools in Iowa should come from Iowa farmers. Okay, thank you.
What I would do for Iowa's waters is what I have started to do as a state representative. I've been on the the Environmental Protection Committee, which many times we combine our bills with the natural resources, but I have been part of the CAFO bills trying to make sure that we have a matrix put in place and that we can put a cap on what's happening in Iowa with all of these animals. That is the first thing I would do, is making sure that we take care of the CAFOs. We have far too many animals, waste being leached into our waterways, which is why we have so much bacteria in our waters. So that is something I've worked with. I've talked to and worked with the Farm Bureau trying to get some of these things through, and we've had farming where they have put in buffers. So we do have some legislation where buffers have been put in on these farms to make sure that there's a break between the farming and the animals and the leaching of that material into the water, so there's a little bit of a buffer. So we're making sure that we have those as truly natural, because we want to have the prairies that we used to have that can filter some of that underground through the root systems, and that's a great way that our farmers can do this. But as Austin said, our family farms are gone, or almost gone, and the ones that we do have, they are great stewards of the land. They do all the things that they should do to protect the waters around them and the creeks around their farms, because they know that that is their livelihood. These big, huge corporate farmers are the ones that are destroying this, and Farm Bureau does protect them. So we need to make sure that we push back on Farm Bureau a lot more. And by going to the Senate, that is something that I would be more than happy to do, because we do need to get back to the water. I would like to get back to kayaking. And I haven't, like I said earlier, haven't been able to do that for 3 years because of how dirty Iowa water is. So there are ways to do this. There are ways to have responsible farming, and we need to make sure that we provide those things and require those things of our farmers. Thank you.
Ms. Donohoe?
Yeah,
I know, it's so different than...
I know.
I know, we kind of changed it up from our normal format. The next question, ask candidates to please prioritize your view of the needs, and including teacher shortages. So include your view of the needs, legislation, and future of education in Iowa.
Well, that's a loaded question.
I know.
There's a lot of needs. So we're going to start with the education, because as an educator, I have firsthand knowledge of this. We need to make sure we're fully funding our schools and making sure our schools have all the materials that they need to provide to those students so that we have education back to the top in the country. I can tell you in the 7 years, I think is what Reynolds has been in office, we started out when she started as governor at number 7 or 8 in the nation, and we have fallen just in that short amount of time to 24. That is unacceptable. If we want good businesses and good jobs here, we have to have great schools. So that would be the first thing I would do with the schools, is making sure that we have the funding and the things that we need to provide to our students to have the best education possible. The other things I would tell you that I would prioritize are coming right off the doors and from the people that I work with. We need to make sure that we have good jobs. We need to make sure that we have collective bargaining returned so that our workers have a voice at the table so that we can have good jobs and good benefits. We need to make sure that we have accessible health care to everyone, particularly mental health care. That is a huge deal at the doors with my people. We need to make sure that we roll back the unemployment bill that just got passed by the governor and the GOP that hurt our workers. We need to look at what is happening in each town for the flood mitigation, and that's still it's still going on, and we need to make sure that they have the funding for that. The infrastructure money that was sent to us by Biden is very helpful, but we have $2 billion in the bank that our governor could have been using to help during COVID, to help people that were struggling keep their head above water, including small businesses. And small businesses support 75% of all employees in this area, and we need to make sure they are receiving some credits versus the CEOs in the big corporations.
I just want to quickly add something onto that water question. The master matrix is the problem. There's nothing to fix there. That was intentionally designed by industry to maintain the current system. Right now in Iowa, at the county level, you can stop the construction of a windmill, but you cannot stop the construction of one of these industrial animal things. There's no saving this system. What we need to do is put animals back on the land, back on a farm. So I just want to make that point clear of the master matrix. But speaking of education, first it starts with childcare. We need to fund childcare like we do K through 12. There's no tax credit here. It's about funding it like you get what you pay for, as I was always told growing up. And the other thing is higher education too. Let's borrow an idea from the radical lefty state of Kentucky and make community college free for those with Iowans with good GPAs. Or the other radical lefty state of New Mexico that made the universities free for local students with good GPAs. I think that's huge. Because right now what we're seeing in Iowa is we load up our students with debt and then they take higher paying jobs elsewhere. Because I think one of the beauties of Iowa is we have a lower cost of living, but the problem is when you load kids up with $40,000 in debt from you and I, they're going to take higher paying jobs elsewhere. Going back to education, it's not just about money too, it's about respect. That's what I hear. It's just a lot of educators, they don't feel like they're treated with respect. And as I was mentioning earlier, it's the Kim Reynolds showing up and stirring the pot. Instead of trying to me, so much of what I thought that the hallmark of Iowa was the Tom Harkin, Chuck Grassley thing of just the bipartisan nature of Iowa. Like I call, this district is full of what I call Bob Bray Democrats. That old-fashioned, middle-of-the-road, they don't like things on the edge, they just want things to get done. And that's what I want to bring to the Senate. Sorry, did one step.
All right, fantastic. Our next question from the audience is, how do you think Iowa should manage access to health care, including mental health?
We need to reverse the privatization of Medicaid. That's where I would start. For mental health, this Farm Bureau is the problem here. There's a great 60-minute episode from 20 years ago on the Iowa Farm Bureau. It's basically a life insurance company in suburban Des Moines pretending to be the voice of farmers. It's a $120 million a year operating nonprofit. That is 3 times the National Farm Bureau. People on the boards make 6-figure salaries. They control Iowa's everything I've heard. They control the legislature. It's not enough to co-sponsor bills. That's what's happening in DC and nothing's getting done. People talk all the time about I sponsor. I want to get things done, and part of it is calling it like it is in Farm Bureau. That they don't want, part of the problem with mental health and funding it is the property tax. Farm Bureau doesn't want to pay for property taxes because it wants to protect the investor class who don't want to pay for this. So we've been unfunding mental health services in Iowa because of the power of this entity. And I think everyone kind of dances around it, but you got to kind of call it like it is. And I think people really respond to it because they know the system's not working, but they don't know why. And you got to speak truth to power.
Starting with mental health. So, mental health, we have made a few gains this last couple of years, but they're just foundational steps. Farm Bureau is a huge issue. They have gone to the GOP in this state and removed the tax that helped pay for our mental health services off of the land property, so farmers aren't paying for that. The sad part of that is that farmers' uptick in mental health has been huge over the last few years, so they are utilizing those services more than most. and they are no longer paying for it. So that is a problem here in Iowa. We need to make sure that that funding is a secure source, and that is through property taxes. It is right now on our sales tax, which is an inconsistent and regressive tax. We can't afford to do that. Every time the governor reduces property taxes, it goes on to those taxes that we pay for when we go to the grocery store or to the gas station. Those taxes aren't consistent, so we don't know how much funding we're going to have in the future. With her giving away all this money that was in the bank that could have helped these things, we're now going to be looking at raising those taxes probably in the next year to make sure we have the revenue possible to pay for the things that we need to pay for, and not just in mental health, but just all of our services. So we must get that back to a consistent funding level and not a regressive tax. We need to make sure it's progressive and that it's available to everybody who needs it. And the only way to do that is to push back on the Farm Bureau. And that's what we have started to do and have been and will continue to do into the future. So that is what my plan is to go back and make sure that we rebuild our mental health foundation and get that funding out so that we can help all the people who need it here in Iowa. Thank you.
All right. Our next question. This session, the state has had legislation around transgender rights. What is your position on LGBTQ issues?
My position is very clear. I have been born and raised into a family who have many people in the LGBTQ community, my sister and her wife and her son. I have stood up on many occasions on our floors because of the student, well, let's go back a little bit. There has been so much pushback in our schools, particularly in this last couple of years. But I have stood up on the floor as a state representative every single time these issues come up to fight for them, and I have been part of those bills. I have put on amendments. This is an area of, it's probably the new issue in our society is that pushback. And we see it on the news day in and day out, and this is unacceptable, not just for the kids, but for the adults. We have lots of people in this state that are diverse, whether they be LGBTQ or whether they be people of color. And we need to protect these marginalized groups so that they are not the kicking board for the GOP in this state that are extremists. And that's our main issue, is all the extremism. These are small groups of people who have very loud voices that tend to get the news because that's what the news goes for. They go for that sensationalized stuff. They aren't the big group people. We can fight back and we will win this because they do not speak for me or the majority of the people in Iowa, even in the GOP. So this is an extreme group that we need to fight back on, and that's what I will continue to do.
Iowa's LGBT organization won Iowa for the first time ever endorsed in a primary, and it was for me. And because of this issue and the fact that I'm a young gay man, I go back to what I said earlier about Kim Reynolds. This is incredibly vile what she's doing, picking on the most vulnerable youth to make political points for Fox News. It's just for Fox News. That is just not the... I go back to Bob Ray and the fact that he welcomed those refugees. He wanted to build Iowa, make Iowa a welcoming community, and now what we're having is I have parents on the door telling me they're losing their children to Denver and Minneapolis because they don't feel safe here. That is not the Iowa I grew up in. That's not what Iowa could be and should be. And part of that is aggressively calling it out like it is, and not just being a representation of the best of Iowa and standing for that community, but also just calling out Kim Reynolds for that behavior. It's not acceptable. These are school matters. Let these schools decide. Don't pick on children. You're picking on children. Like that's what even the LGBT stuff aside, you're picking on children. That is unacceptable for a governor of a state, let alone a politician.
Our next question asks, how will you be able to move work forward and pass your legislative priorities given the current elected officials in Des Moines?
I'm laughing because I used to be Republican. I loved Fox News when I was little. And I'm laughing too because, so like, my grandfather's my hero in my life, as my family knows. He's my middle name's Ronald. I'm named after him. He grew 1,000 pumpkins for my wedding last fall. He polished each one. And I never thought 10 years ago that my grandparents would be so joyful that I would have I married not only a gay wedding, it was a Jewish wedding in a small town in Iowa. Like, look how far we've come in 10 years. I never thought that'd be such a joyful event. But I used to read Bill O'Reilly books. I used to watch Bill O'Reilly every night. Our family's pretty good at being half and half R&D. And I think because of that, I think it kind of blows my mind on the doors. I speak to so many Iowans whose families have just blown up because of this. I think my political superpower is yes, I'm over here, but I understand how to talk over here and how to show respect and move a ball forward. I think water quality is actually huge here. It's a bipartisan thing, but also talking tough on China. I think that's a really huge sweet spot in Iowa for Democrats that hasn't been tapped into. Terry Brance is a Chinese lobbyist. His son's a Chinese lobbyist. But the Democrats in Iowa aren't talking about that. Between you and I also leaked this story about his son being a Chinese lobbyist to a reporter, and that's how that story got out. I personally think China's a fascist country, and I think we've lost a lot as a country when we offshored our manufacturing supply system to China. So much of Iowa is full of Mason City's Keokuks that lost their manufacturing factories to China because they can't compete against a country that puts its own people in concentration camps at forced labor. I think talking tough on that is how we make inroads and get back to the majority in Iowa, is talking about that.
I think most of us can say we were born and raised in a Republican household. But it is a different world today. I'm not even sure there's a Republican Party. I am going to be working with people in the Senate across the aisle, but before I even get there, I'm going to make sure that we elect officials up and down the ticket that are Democrats, that are going to fight for these things, because we cannot get our legislation through unless we build our party. And that is the number one thing we must do to get our priorities across. So the first thing I'm going to do is make sure that we get as many people as we can elected and make sure that Kim Reynolds ends her career. Let's get Deidre DeGear in there, and that cuts the head off the monster. We may not be able to get the House and the Senate back this year, but we're going to gain seats. And with a Democratic governor, we're going to be able to get the things we want done. So that is my first goal. But once we are there, we do need to work together, and we do. I have put forth many amendments on bills that have made them better for Iowans. And I will continue to fight for the bills that we want, but I will amend any legislation that's put forth that is fixable, because if it's not fixable, we let it go. We can't, we'll just fight against it. But I will put forth whatever we can do and get passed and work on that and build on that with people across the aisle. But again, the first thing, we gotta get Kim Reynolds out, we gotta get Deidre DeGear in, and we have to go up and down the ballot with Democrats, and that's what I will do, is help fight for all of that. Thank you. I didn't move.
Good job. Good job. All right, the next question is, what is your position on ethanol?
My position on ethanol. I'm not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it is not the greatest thing on earth. It is better than what we have available to us right now. I'm not thrilled with the E15 bill, but it is, again, better than what we have currently. It is just a beginning. So ethanol for now helps us economically, it helps our farmers, and it helps with hopefully lowering a little bit of the gas prices. But because ethanol also burns cleaner, it's also less efficient, which means you're buying more of it. So this is just, again, the beginning. But we need cleaner energies. We need to make sure that we're using wind. We need to make sure that we're building those solar. We need to put solar on our homes. We need to get electric cars. Those need to get going, but we have to fix the infrastructure before we can do that. Right now, if we all had electric cars, we would blow out our system. And that's why we have to start where we are and move forward from here. This is a beginning, not an end with ethanol. It is just the start of moving forward to a much cleaner environment and a much cleaner, efficient energy use. And so that's where I stand. Thank you.
Oh wow, that sounded like a 2005 George Bush speech on ethanol. No, I mean with rising food prices right now, we cannot be doubling down on ethanol. We are literally burning food in our cars when we have a global food crisis on the horizon. It's happening fast. You have Sri Lanka having a government overthrow. A lot of countries are destabilizing. We need to worry about that. That's huge. I mean, we're talking about even in our southern border in America, a lot of these Central American countries are going to be facing food crises, and that will send migrants north looking for a new life. And doubling down on ethanol when we've been talking about being a bridge fuel for 30 years, it ain't going to do it. We need to making a hard pivot now. It's hard to not, especially in southern Iowa, that used to be cattle country. The soil's not as good, and so you'd see a lot more cattle on the land. And then with ethanol, we just took a lot of those cattle farms out of production. We put in more corn. And guess what? John Deere's building driverless tractors up in Waterloo. Do we want the future of Iowa to be a bunch of absentee landowners like Bill Gates having their driverless little tractors operating from Chicago to grow more ethanol? Or do we actually want to grow more food and have more animals in the land and more family farms? So I think that we need to stop talking about the bridge fuel of ethanol and actually cross the bridge and talk about what's next.
Don't go anywhere. I'm hoping we can get 2 more questions in here. So we do have a question about how would you address undocumented immigrants in the Iowa workforce?
Two things. A lot of these families is giving them the support services they need, but then also looking at the employers that are doing this. I mean, a lot of it's meat packing. A lot of it's actually a matter of refrigeration. These workers are in a very exploitive position where a lot of them live in these small towns in Iowa. They're company towns. That's what I did my college thesis on, is I spent a whole summer bouncing around talking to these mayors, talking to the preachers, talking to the principals. When you're an undocumented worker in these small towns, you have no power, and the employers know. These meat monopolies know, and they exploit the heck out of the workers. What we saw during COVID with these workers was only a fraction of what happens. I mean, this used to be a good middle-class job that my grandfather used to work at the Wilsons. You can make a good living on. Those days are long gone. So part of it is, yes, how do we help these families now stabilize and provide them the support services they need? But then how do we crack down so this problem doesn't continue? Because the problem is, once a company's this big, they buy off the political system. You know, when Smithfield has 20 hog slaughterhouses, even if you organize one plant, they'll just shut it down, and that means nothing to them. So part of it is going back to that Teddy Roosevelt era, making these companies, breaking up these companies, helping the workers, and getting them the support services they need. Am I good?
Iowa's immigration is an issue. There's wage theft happening because these meat packing plants and the agribusiness that are utilizing them don't allow unions. They aren't unionized. They aren't protected. As far as the first thing I would do is make sure that we get our dreamers protected, because they came here with their families for a better life, and they are here today unprotected, unable to participate in the system, and they didn't have a choice of coming here. So we need to make sure that they're protected. We need to make sure they're in school, that they're educated, and we need to make sure then that their parents are protected in their places of work as well. It's kind of a catch-22. So these big businesses and corporations and CEOs are typically GOP, And they tend to be the ones that are complaining about the illegal immigrants, but they are the ones that are hiring them at the low wages and stealing wages. So we need to crack down on those companies. That's the first thing we have to do, is crack down on the companies, crack down on those CEOs. We need to make sure that there is a pathway for these people to come here and actually live, not hiding under the table or getting paid under the table, so that they can do better for themselves and their families. So those are the things we have to do. We have to go after those companies who are doing this in the first place, and then turning around and saying, oh, those immigrants. We need these workers too. We are short on workers in this country and in this state. So let's not vilify people coming here to better their lives, and let's help them better their lives.
One last question in, and that is, how would your life experiences inform your work as a state senator?
Well, my life experiences already do help me in my position as a state representative, and they will continue to do that as a senator, as a school teacher, but also as a community member and knowledgeable about all of the different various needs of my community, because I'm out and available and engaged in it on a regular basis. So I will take all of those to the Senate, all of the things that people have shared with me, their concerns, their suggestions, their needs, to the Senate with me, because I am a people first. The door knocking is one of the most important things that I have done. I know that in the past, not all senators get out and knock on the doors. That is always going to be my number one thing. Obviously, money is part of the issue when you run. I do not think money should be the issue. We need to make sure that we are, as elected officials, available to our people. And we must be around every day, every time you're in town, to do that. You cannot do this job appropriately without being engaged in your community and participating with your neighbors on a regular basis and help that community. You have to be there to do it. So that's what I will do. I will take all my experience and my knowledge of my area to the Senate with me and continue to fight for the people first. One more. All right.
I would say that I've always viewed myself kind of as the underdog. And so I've always kind of had that Tom Harkin notion of the way you measure ourselves as a society is how do we look after the least lost and left behind. And that is something I think I will always bring, is just caring for those people. I mean, it's so clear we're living in a second Gilded Age, and it's working for some, but a lot of people are falling behind, and you just see it on the doors. You see it at the pain in people's faces, how the ladder of opportunity in our society is just breaking and collapsing in front of us. I think part of it too is also I'm just naturally kind of feisty. And I think that's what Democrats need more of, is we need to hold power accountable. It's not enough to co-sponsor. You have to do oversight. You have to work with journalists behind the scenes to highlight these issues. You have to build coalitions. You have to make people angry, but also show them what it could be, to galvanize, to overcome the powers that be. Because we can talk about how bad Farm Bureau is, but they're going to flood the airways with money. So how do we overcome that? And part of it is getting on KCRG at night to show people, hey, this is what's going on. I have a little thing on my computer where Farm Bureau has 2 jets. I have a little tracker, so every time that the little airplane takes off, I get a little ping in the email. They were just in DC, they go to Santa Fe sometimes. Like the hog baron I talked about earlier, that man flew over 240 flights during COVID because he had a home down in Naples. I think that galvanizes people because it just feels wrong in Iowa. And like I always had this sense of right and wrong, and that really taps into people's sensibilities. So yeah, I think with me, it's someone who looks out for the underdog, but also has a little bit of feistiness to it.
So in just a moment, we're going to move on to our closing statements, but I would like to thank our candidates for coming this morning and participating in this important voter education program. The League of Women Voters is proud to offer these services to all citizens of Lynn County. I'd also like to thank our host, the Public Library here in Cedar Rapids, as well as Pro Video for providing the recording today. I would be remiss if I didn't remind anyone who needs an absentee ballot that the deadline is Monday at 5 p.m. We do have forms on our back table, so if you fill one out today, we will be happy to drop it off for you on Monday. Satellite voting has begun at the Oxley Building, and of course, I would like to remind everybody to vote on Tuesday, June 7th. So with that, I would like to call candidate Frerichs up to provide his closing statement.
I just want to say again, it would be an honor to earn your vote, and I promise to make you proud. With me, you'll get a candidate that offers a different strategy for Democrats, not more of the same, expecting a different result. You'll get a fighter, you'll get someone feisty, and you'll get someone young. You'll get someone that will put forward a new agriculture vision for Democrats in Iowa, someone that will put forward a new economic vision for Democrats in Iowa. You'll get someone that will get in the news, not just co-sponsor, but get in the news, drive conversation, highlight issues that people aren't paying attention to. But you also get someone that's incredibly grateful to this state and that adores this state. This state has done so much for me, and I want to do so much for it. I think you have to highlight the bad. People also crave positive right now. I mean, one of my favorite things to talk about in the doors is how great downtown Marion is now. How do we make more of that? I mean, for the last 2 years, we've all been trapped in our homes. The malls have died. People crave public spaces to go hang out. And I know a lot of work, decades of work, went into making Marion happen. How do we do more of that? And to me, part of that is Vision Iowa. I think that was one of the best, most successful programs in recent modern Iowa history was from Governor Tom Vilsack. Did it in the late 90s. It forever changed Dubuque. My mom would always take us on vacation to Dubuque growing up. I just thought it was such a cool town. And how do we do that? How do we, we had the opportunity right now. We had a surplus in Iowa. We could have put forward that pot of money, let communities articulate a vision, build something, make people feel proud, but instead Kim Reynolds gave rich people a tax cut. So I want to fight back, but I also want to fight for what Iowa could be. Thank you. Hope to earn your vote.
First, I'm not real old, just so you know. But the fact of the matter is I do have experience already in the State House, and I am a fighter, and believe me, I am not like anyone else there. They will tell you that. I am upfront, I am forthright, and I do not hold back on what I want to say and what I want to do. You will get a fighter in me, you already have a fighter in me, and I will continue that as your senator. I have had the honor of a lifetime to serve as a state representative, and in that time, I have learned so much about all the different things that Iowa is in need of and Iowa has the potential for. I have learned a great deal from my senator, Liz Mathis, who I'm thrilled to have her endorsement from. I have learned a great deal from Rob Hogue, who I'm also thrilled to have his endorsement from. I would be representing half of Liz Mathis's district, as well as half of Rob Hogue's district. So their support of me has made this much more, I guess, fun for me, because they know that I'm willing to put in that fight and that I will step into their shoes and do what is necessary for the people of Iowa. They are the most important, and I've said this before. My campaigns have always been people first. I'm at your doors even when it's not door knocking season, because I want to know what's happening. If somebody calls me and they need help with care workers because they're on Medicaid and they aren't getting their people paid, I am there. I will find who they need to talk to get what they need. If they need, help with unemployment, they call me, I help them. I am a people person. That's what you get with me. You're going to get somebody who's going to fight for individuals as well as the schools, as well as the small businesses. And I'm thrilled that I have all of those supports from those people that I've worked with in the past. I thank you, and I hope you'll vote for me.
Thank you, audience, for joining us today for the State Senate District 37 Forum. Thank you, candidates, for participating, and remember, everyone, to vote on June 7th. So thank you again.